but focused on a sense of higher purpose and love of God and wanting to be pleasing to God and wanting to live a life that's good for the whole society and for the sake of others, on that basis you engage in this relationship. So we're going to talk into that sort of theme about how a family, a true family, can be the basis or the building block for a world of peace and happiness. So I just, again, if you look in this World Scripture Anthology, you'll find so many different quotations. So inevitably I could only select a few, but just to give a bit of variety and to give a sense for how there's a recognition of the significance of family and the conjugal marital relationship and so on. So from the Quran, Lord, give us joy in our wives and children and make us models for the God-fearing. Or from Confucianism, the moral man finds the moral law beginning in the relation between man and woman, but ending in the vast reaches of the universe. So somehow the beginnings of morality is expressed in that significant relationship, which is at the centre of the family. Or from Sikhism, not those are true husband and wife, that with each other merely consort. Sorry, it's quite, it's translation of course, but it's still trying to give that sense of a slightly older language. So it's not enough merely to be with one another. Truly wedded are those that in two frames are as one light. That's poetic. You become as one. You melt into a oneness as husband and wife. And what is that oneness? In a sense, that oneness is a fuller representation of God than you can be just by yourself, because the masculine and the feminine can be together. Or from Buddhism, supporting one's father and mother, cherishing wife and children, and a peaceful occupation. This is the greatest blessing. Or from the New Testament, Christian Gospels. Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason, the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Of course, this is a reference back to Judaism and the Old Testament as well. So this is just a taste of how there is an appreciation of the incredible importance of love between man and woman, connected to God at the core of the family in all those traditions. So just to examine that more, this is an interesting thought or way of expressing it in terms of the impact of making this place that I talked about before. So I find this is a very useful sort of shorthand to understand how things should work. So always this place in the middle is so important, because husband and wife should meet each other rooted in their love for God and their sense of higher purpose and wanting to bring benefit not only to themselves but to their wider family and the wider society. So this act of love is not just a self-centered act of love, but actually something that's being embarked upon to be in accordance with higher principles, or beautiful to God, or fulfilling God's purpose or God's intention. And then when they meet together in this place, when they become one through their interaction of love, centering on a higher purpose, then out of that oneness, children are born. And so you can say, if you like, from true love comes new life, true life. So we can all understand, I think, the quality of this relationship and its connectedness to God and higher purpose is very, very important. So, I'm trying to remember names here. Balder was asking me about all sorts of ways that we can reach the richest, powerful people in society and create influence to make a better world. And of course that's not an insignificant thing, it's something we need to do. And there are many different approaches, But most fundamentally in the end, of course, we need to uplift myself. That's a very important function of religion, and that was finding peace in myself. And then on the basis of uplifting myself, through following religious practice and seeking to live for the sake of God and others, then you seek to manifest that in your own family. And you seek to manifest that in the relationship. So, in most of the great faiths, this coming together of husband and wife, this pledging oneself to each other, is done in front of God, is done in front of your family, is done in front of the society. So how can we uplift this? How can we teach people about this? And although we might feel that we're living in a sort of a very highly educated, advanced society, and in this part of the world we're much wealthier than we were in the past, have access to much more knowledge than we did before, we have to question sometimes whether we have enough learning about what is love and enough upliftment of character and personality based on that first level of peace. Because unless we can improve the quality of relationships between men and women out of which children are born, then actually our destiny is probably not so great. So people are always talking about, and it's not without significance, of course, people are always expressing we need to improve our economic well-being to have a better world. And of course, again, Robin's explanation about Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, yes, of course, we need to eat, we need to not be impoverished, we need to feel comfortable and so on. But actually, if we want to uplift the society in a more profound sense, then we need to uplift love. And we need to uplift the motivation for the sake of God and other people that we come together under. And then out of that sort of quality of love, then a quality of life can emerge. And then what does that life become? That sets a tradition. So you without question, when religion has operated at its very best, an outcome is that the society as a whole has been uplifted. And where's the crucial place for that upliftment to take? It's in the quality of interaction between husband and wife at the core of the family, and the impact that has on children. That's not a simple matter, as we all know. There may be quite a lot of people who've themselves led good lives but had lots of struggles with their kids, for example. So I'm not saying it's all simplistic and a foregone conclusion, but I think at the same time, if we have a focus here, then this is very important. And to explain to one another what is true love, for example. So we're going to examine a bit more about that. But at heart and core, it's the quality of the motivation upon which the relationship is embarked upon. Because the quality of this, giving and receiving and responding, this give and take action, this will determine the quality of the outcome. And of course, you could put here, before children, husband and wife unite and become one. Then this is a couple, and this united couple, which according to that beautiful passage from the Adi Granth, the Sikh scripture, they're two frames, but they become one light. They merge into a oneness. So that oneness in love is the source out of which the children are born, and then that creates a tradition of love. So there's no question about it. If there's a very high standard of love and security within the family, this can pass through the generations in a very positive way. It's not all a foregone conclusion. Every child will have their own responsibility. But if we can lift that standard up and pass it through, to become lineage, then this is very significant. I spent some years working as a children and family social worker, working particularly with foster families. And then, of course, you see many difficult circumstances where children have been removed from their own families because of abusive conduct that was happening within those families. And of course, often, not always, and it doesn't mean it has to be like that, but in some cases you could understand why that was happening, because the parents themselves had been in a similar circumstance in their own life, and they didn't have resources that have come from their parents to themselves, they could readily pass on to their children. So of course it's not an absolute that if you have abusive parents, you will be an abusive parent yourself, but it certainly doesn't help. And there's a tendency like that. So how to lift this up is very important, and how to understand the type of heart and motivation that leads to lie behind love. So this is a very important thing to examine, and also a very important thing for young people to be aware of. So there's so much in our very materialistic society, and all societies have tended to move in that direction. So if you look at all the great traditions, they're all around understanding not to be egoistic, not to be self-centered, not to just be purely materialistic. But there's always a move in that direction. So much influence about an attitude to life that can very easily become exploited in relationships of supposedly love, where people use each other for their own pleasure, but they don't actually have a very profound commitment to that relationship. And it ends up being very hurtful and painful and disappointing and so on. Oh, right, okay. Our founder had a very strong insight into a sense into this whole concept of lineage. He says, marriage joins the life of one man and the life of one woman and the life of one man. In time, through the children, it joins the lineage of the man and the lineage of the woman. It thus begins a history, a nation, the world, and the kingdom of heaven on earth. So if you can get that right, then that's a very important basis for a better world. So where do we learn about true love? Of course, our parents in that sense are our first teachers and our first role models, and it's extraordinarily influential. And probably those of us who are parents, we recognise that we've had some shortcomings in our role as parents, and possibly we recognise that part of that is through the experiences we had in our own childhood and our own upbringing. But again, through being uplifted, through being guided by Scripture, by religious founders, by good examples, by high moral teaching, we can seek to improve ourselves. And so what is the family? The family is the school of love because it nurtures heart and character. It's the primary training ground for relationships. And I think it must be very positively influential for our children if we've been able to sustain a meaningful relationship out of which they came into existence. So there's no question about it. Those who have been separated from their family, or there's a certain longing to discover your origin, in a sense. Ultimate origin, I would always express for all human beings, ultimate origin is actually God. But the way in which, when man and woman come together in love, they connect to that origin of love, that will be very significant. So anyhow, many other things we could say in relationship to the family, so I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. So another image there in a different culture of brothers and sisters, siblings, the wider family, the extended family. So the extended family is a very important place. Of course our parents are important, but our siblings are important. And then growing wider out to that, our cousins, our peers, and intergenerationally, our grandparents. This is all a very important place to learn, and hopefully, again, the quality of love and experience can be very influential in then what happens later on in our own lives. So in that sense, the family is also the school of morality. It's the basis for the type of behaviour, the societal norms, the code of conduct, which then would spread out from our family into our wider relationships. So making a big emphasis here, understanding the value of this and the importance of this and the seriousness with which we embark on relationships between men and women and giving birth to our children and so on, the level of commitment that's involved in that is very significant in making a society where people can behave properly towards one another. And of course we're also learning a lot in that conjugal relationship between husband and wife. So usually, when people want to put charming pictures up, for example, to advertise something and make you buy it, it's usually the beautiful, slim, handsome or beautiful. But I personally find this is a lovely pin-up. In the Second World War, they had this expression, pin-up, because the soldiers would take some picture of some film star, stick it up, when they were in the lonely one, of course their sweetheart, when they're in some lonely place, and be uplifted. But actually, isn't it beautiful to see people who are later in life, who are looking at one another, or demonstrating that there's a very profound bond of love between them. And I was heading somewhere before in what I said, and I sort of left the track a little bit. Usually everybody's been emphasizing, particularly in this part of the world, since the Second World War, economic development as the solution to everything. But actually even more precious than economic development or accruing of wealth or greater gross national product, something even more valuable is actually the accumulation of love through good experiences within the family and the passing on of that experience. And if you lose it, then that's even more difficult to recover, than economic well-being. So we've got to reflect a lot about that in our rich part of the world, but along with becoming richer, it seems to have been getting more difficult for people to establish lasting love relationships. It's a real struggle. And this is a very important mission also for UPF, but generally speaking for people of religious conviction, to support and help people to establish meaningful relationships. And it's not an easy job to do. It's a very tough job to do. And oftentimes, when people are struggling with one another, what we have to remind them of or take them back to is, how are you a person of integrity? Have you kept your promises? Are you conducting yourself in accordance with your own moral standards? Otherwise, it's very difficult to be a good husband or wife. So, in a sense, UPF in its principles would express that a man and woman united in love, they become a more complete expression of God in our human world than they can be as individuals, because they manifest these different aspects that come through the male and female as an expression of love towards children. And there's so much thought-provoking things there which I hope will provoke you to discuss. And obviously when we have good families should not just be there for my family. We love each other and we're very nice to each other, but we're not bothered about anybody else around us. But if you have the blessing, yes, the blessing of economic well-being, but also the blessing of emotional stability and sense of profound security and positive relationships within your family, then of course you're not supposed to just keep that for yourself. So you're supposed to bring it into the wider society. So how can you as parents set an example of having an interest in what's going on within your community, what's going on within your town, how you are being of service to others, and establish an example that leads your children not just want to look after themselves, but have a natural feeling to want to altruistically get involved in helping other people around them. If we can pass that, that sense for living for others down through the generations, that's extraordinarily significant as well. So I want to just think a little bit more about the dynamic of this and how it develops. And I'm going to put the whole diagram up. So when our founders were expressing very deeply about family, they expressed that you can see different expressions of love. Of course, there are just like you can mix colours together and you can make thousands of colours. You can mix these loves together in a sense, and you can have you can love your cousin, you can love your grandparent, you can love your great grandparent. There's endless varieties of love in a sense, but the fundamental loves, which have such an impact also on one another and have an expression of the development of love, and we're going to talk about them, is the children's love towards parents, of course, the responsive love of a child to a parent who's been loving and living for their sake. The relationship between siblings, brothers and sisters, which of course then develops out into wider peer relationships. The love between husband and wife, or spouses, or conjugal love, and the love of parents for children. So we're going to somehow think about the development of those different loves in that model that we had before of husband and wife coming together in love. So understanding this by itself, of course, doesn't automatically make you a perfect parent, but it's very much provoking us to think seriously about the way we embark on human relationships and how important they are, and how important faith or quality of character, developed in myself as an individual is something very important to prepare before embarking on this relationship, and before embarking on romantic and sexual interaction between men and women. So we tend as a wealthy society now to be getting more and more careless about that, and think of it as just something that you somehow enjoy, or very, very careless, casual way of thinking about it. But this I'm going to explain the diagram, and I've already started to explain it really. So, ideal starting point for life would be that in my life I'm the product of the meeting of my father and my mother in such a way that when they met in love, they were fulfilling the plan or the intention of God. And in God the Creator, the origin, because God made everything after God's own likeness, or the Creator created after his own likeness. When you bring mind and body together in harmony, it's a greater resemblance of God. When you bring man and woman together in harmony, it's a greater resemblance of God. They're made for the sake of each other. God created men for women and women for men, and in this very particular and unique relationship of love, husband for wife and wife for husband. So they're the most precious gift from God to each other, in a sense. And where they meet each other, they should have an ambition to meet each other in a place that God can bless and is pleased by and approve of. And then from that place, the love of God passes down to children through parents. And there's a direct connection in that. So it's not just theoretically or theologically, but actually, feeling the love of God through the love of parents. Ideally would be like that. And then naturally, because we're created by God to respond to one another, naturally out of that children's love is born. So, children are so beautiful to parents, and children so naturally respond loving parents back. So this arrow here, in a masculine expression through a son, or a feminine expression through a daughter, this blue one here, if you like, this is representing children's love. So, how does our own capacity to love develop? It's crucially important that we are in a secure, loving environment. Otherwise, how can we ourselves even begin to love? So, as a social worker in my training, you get all this explanation about disturbed children and how that springs from a lack of attachment. Have you heard this word? Attachment. They talk about bonding. That's the natural attraction that parents have towards their children, to care for them, nurture them, and look after them. To some degree, we all have that. Because when you see a little baby, or even when you see a little puppy, or anything that's beautiful and young and needing support, then you feel naturally drawn to it. So parents feel drawn to their children, and then when children are receiving that sort of warmth of love and that sensitivity, then children are brought out of a sense of insecurity to one of great security, where they in turn can love back, and then that develops into a capacity to love beyond the love of their parents, towards their brothers and sisters, and towards the wider society. So the sort of security that's built out. So if you've studied child development, or have some awareness of that, you'll be aware of this importance of attachment. So the responsive love, if you like, children's love, return to parents, this is the first step in the development of the individual. And rooted or grounded in that, then comes sibling love. In other words, you begin to love not just in returning love to your parents, but you begin to reach out in love as a brother or a sister. So this is sibling love, this arrow here. And then these two courses of development, they in a sense accumulate in yourself. Because through your mind and body interacting in loving your parents and loving your brothers and sisters, you actually, by living like that, you are participating in the development of yourself. And it becomes expressed not only within your own family, but towards... Have any of you been watching that television program about 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds?
Yes.
I don't know if you've been seeing it. They've done a sort of documentary, almost a secret camera of the interaction between children. It's fascinating to see it, and how they've been influenced in that way, and how they're then interacting with one another or struggling with one another. So what this means is the male child, the son, responding to parental love, loving them back with a child's love, and then on the foundation of that, having the security to feel a sense of being loved and securely relate to brothers and sisters. This child's love and siblings' love accrue here. So you've got the blue there and the brown there. So it means through that process of growing up and maturing and spreading that out to your wider relationships beyond your family, you've become someone who's practiced in living for the sake of others, understands about the right sort of heart and motivation with which to undertake any task or to relate to any person, that you're doing it to do something that's in accordance with your higher principles, your moral code of conduct, for the sake of a higher purpose, something that's beautiful to God if you have a religious belief, and something where you give of yourself for the benefit of the other. And that practicing that in your life is very important as a preparation to undertake this relationship. Because, the relationship with your mates, with your friends, with your colleagues is very significant to your happiness and so on, but children will not be born out of it. Right? So this relationship between man and woman is more critical, but it's on the foundation of those previous experiences. So if people come together, but they have no prior experience of, following the higher moral code. So if you make a promise to someone, you're actually going to keep it. You're actually going to do your sincere best for the sake of the other person. Not having had any experience of that, it's very difficult to suddenly embark on the intimacy of marital relationship or man-woman romantic relationship or sexual relationship and be able to undertake that in a way that's true to the purpose of creation, if you like, or God's intention in making man and woman. So, just by explaining this will not solve everything, but there's a perception in this of certain things that we need to concentrate on in our own families, and also in raising up young people and giving them opportunities to experience doing altruistic things, living for the sake of others, building very positive and good experiences in living for others in their wider life in preparation to becoming husband and wife. And so then there's a cycle, then having grown through this process, come together with husband and wife and make this place and then pass the love of God to the next generation. And then so one's creating lineage through this sort of way. So this sort of understanding of how these loves interact and build upon one another. So very significant. You can't make good conjugal love, that's husband and wife love, spouses love, without the foundation of parental love and yourself responding to that as a son or a daughter and expanding that out through siblings love and so on. This is a necessary step-by-step process, but the ultimate goal, in a sense, is to meet in this place, to bear children, to pass the love of God on to the next generation. This is a very insightful way of thinking about love and the development of love and what is true love, if you like. So, this is the expansion of that love, starting from the love of God, developing in my life through parental love and my response to it as a child, my experience of it as a sibling, and then my experience of it as husband and wife, and then myself becoming a parent. So there's no question about it. On the right foundation, when you yourself experience becoming a parent, there's a whole other quality of experience in love that emerges from that. And you ideally would share together as husband and wife. So there's a lot of thought in that about how important it is to raise up the quality of the family. Also, of course, implied by that is how important it is how we meet together in the sexual relationship as men and women. Because this is a holy meeting. This is not just something where we... of course, this is not to say that men and women can only come together in sexual relationship in order to procreate. Of course, there's other dimensions, unquestionably, to the sexual relationship. It isn't just for the sake of giving birth to children. For example, people who are older in life, there may not be any possibility anymore to create children through the sexual relationship, but still that sexual relationship is an act of love and intimacy and a bonding relationship between men and women. So if this relationship is regarded casually or mistreated or dealt with carelessly, of course it's hugely destructive, to the two parties, because they're actually exploiting the other person in the most profound and damaging fashion. So probably, again, if you've read about such things, or if you've had dealings with children, for example, who've been sexually exploited, or people who have maybe in their childhood been exploited in that way, and the impact it has on them in their adult life, you know what a huge impact this has, because it's such a destructive issue to your value as a human being, because it's so much intrinsic to your deepest need to be loved and respected the way that we're treated in interpersonal and sexual relationships. So it may seem like a strange strategy to work for world peace, but the Universal Peace Federation has always been very hot on this topic and talking about sexual love and the importance of sexual love and the great damage that is caused when that's undertaken carelessly. And consequently, Father and Mother Moon led us in doing a lot of work towards strengthening family and marriage, bringing a recognition of family and marriage. Way back in 1992, Margaret and I headed off to Seoul, Korea, to the Olympic Stadium that had just been used 4 years before for a very big wedding of 30,000 couples. And we were on the plane together with a Muslim couple, Christian couple, and a Sikh couple. And we all went there together and sat in the stands to give our support to marriage and family. And on the ground of the Olympic Stadium were lots of young couples. So the older couples were re-pledging themselves not only to God and to each other, but also to a world where love would be uplifted. And the young couples, beginning their marital relationship, did so in the sense in the protection and upliftment of those people. So this is something very important which people don't necessarily talk about so much. So also what it is talking about is fidelity and commitment. So the capacity to be true to your word and true to another human being is very important for love. And the most critical place to establish it is in these most intimate of relationships, out of which new life will be created. So if we can uplift that one, if we can improve that one, then actually it will be very, very impactful. And a man's sexual love belongs exclusively to his wife, and a woman's sexual love belongs exclusively to her husband. Father was always getting in front of large groups of ex-presidents and senior people and expressing them to them and asking them pointed questions about how they're... Didn't always get an immediate answer, of course, but he had a little expression. He said, the husband has the key to the wife, and the wife has the key to the husband, and you shouldn't be sharing your keys with anybody else. Sexual relations. And the importance of expressing commitment, fidelity, and bringing your moral sense and your love for God into the core of your marital relationship, and therefore into the core of your family, and therefore creating security for your children. So reality is, of course, many of us have had difficult experiences in that way and may not have been able to, establish that. And then, of course, what do? Even if we were not able to establish that, it doesn't mean we don't wish that for other people. It doesn't mean we still wish that we could establish such a relationship, or would look for a person to establish such a relationship, or would wish such a thing for our children. So there's many points caught up in that, and no doubt you'll have lots of questions about it, so I'll try and be quicker. Okay, just I want to do one last little bit, and this is about the relationship between ourselves and the natural world. So this really deserves a lot more than I'm going to give it, but I focused on the other ones. Again, same diagram fundamentally, but this is talking about us, hopefully us as true individuals, where my mind is connected to God and my mind directs my body to do lots of good things, and I grow into a person of good character with a personality that resembles that of God in a sense. And I'm in a marriage and a family where similarly husband and wife are exchanging love centered on God and bringing the love of God down into the family. But then such a people, such a society, such a nation, such a world, how would we then treat the natural world in which we live? We would automatically consider that the natural world is our God-given partner. God has given us this amazing, incredible environment which we have a certain capacity to interact with and in a very positive way that can bring so many wonderful developments and bring a greater abundance and enable us to express love and generosity to others by increasing abundance. But obviously if we behave in an exploitative way, just using things, not seeing them as a gift from God that doesn't just belong to me but belongs to God, belongs to my children, belongs to future generations, belongs to humanity at large, then we'd be in great danger of misusing things and being very careless. So it's good, isn't it, that we start to think a lot more consciously than we ever have done before about how we react, how we interact with nature, the world in which we live. And there's a certain sense that if we're not careful, we're creating huge insecurity about the very future of humanity if we don't have the right heart and attitude. But obviously the moral code is the key, isn't it? I mean, there's no question about it. I take the dog for a walk every morning to the country park that's 5 minutes drive from my home. And when I get there in the morning, in the fairly early morning, all the other dog walkers are out there, sometimes we get out of the car and they're in this beautiful car park that looks out over the green fields, out to the sea. And on some very clear days we even see the French coast from there. Beautiful, beautiful environment looking along the whole coastline. Sometimes on the grass there's the Kentucky Fried Chicken boxes and the McDonald's wrappers and all sorts of junk, and sometimes some slightly even more disturbing rubbish, is left there because people have gone and parked there at night, just chucked everything out the windows, and maybe also had sometimes careless relationships with one another, and left the remnants of that also in the car park. And you think, how could somebody do that? Because you wouldn't do that yourself. But how could somebody do that? But, our own quality as a person who has an awareness for what's pleasing to God or what's moral, and has an awareness of how much I hold in my hands the happiness of others, then that person, of course, can conduct themselves well towards the natural world as well. And then, as I said, there's through true ownership, responsible stewardship, then there's so much prosperity and development and benefit, not only for us, but for the whole environment that we can develop. And of course, the universe we live in is just endless possibilities there. So true ownership, responsible stewardship, just some images to make us think of that in terms of human creativity, the inspiration we get from nature and art, the love we can have from, I'm visiting a lot of people in their homes who are caring for one another. Many of them still manage to retain a great joy from their garden, for example, or their pot plants or something, because it's such a joy to interact with the natural world. And if we use things correctly, we can build and make things of such benefit to one another. So I'm going to conclude with that, I think. Let me just make sure it's not another one. Oh yeah, no, just this one. As you know, UPF has its Ambassador for Peace program. This was a conference we had in London, a world-level conference really back in 2008, and some of the front row of ambassadors for peace, but we're talking about, as ambassadors of peace, taking responsibility, set an example in terms of individual peace, and in terms of family and societal peace, and in terms of sort of universal peace. So we should be a good role model by being a good individual. We should set a good standard of understanding about what's at the core of a good family and society, and seek to practice that. And if we mess up, not become, not just give up on that, but continue to encourage others, continue to try ourselves to establish a good standard in that way. And of course we should exercise good stewardship and dominion. So, of course we want to influence the wider society, but the starting point is also my own. Okay.